Well, hello, I'm Erica Hood with the Center for Reducing Health Disparities, and I'm here today with another one of our community spotlights. And I'm here with some wonderful guests who are amazing individuals, and they're representing Neighborhood Connections today. So we have Morgan Taggert. Hey, Morgan.
Hi.
And Kaela Geschke. And these guys are going to tell us a bit about their work. So you guys are here today from Neighborhood Connections, and who wants to jump in to tell me a little bit about the organization and what the mission of the organization is?
Sure, I can start. So I'm the community network manager at Neighborhood Connections. We've been around for 18 years, giving out small grants directly to neighborhood groups so that they can decide what needs to happen in their neighborhood to make it a place they want to live. So that's been happening for a long time. And then about 7-8 years ago, Neighbor Up started. And what that was from noticing that not everyone who was doing this great, amazing, inspiring work in their own neighborhoods knew each other. It could be 2 streets apart, or it could be like east-west, and they were doing the same stuff. We realized there was so much good happening in Cleveland. We needed a way for people to start networking with one another, sharing their gifts, skills, talents, but also getting folks in the room. If a whole bunch of people are all concerned about the same thing in their neighborhood and trying to make it better, how can we use collective voice to raise that issue in another way? So kind of partnering with institutions and residents at the same time to look at stuff from a different perspective and use everyone's skill set. So that's when we started the Neighbor Up Network, and that's our mission, creating an extraordinary place right where you live.
I love it. I love it. And being connected with great organizations who have taken part in Neighborhood Connections grants, and also a part of the Neighbor Up Network. It's been great. It's been great to see how it has unfolded over the years. And Morgan, what work do you do with Neighborhood Connections?
Yeah, so I'm the director of a project called Fair Food Access Raises Everyone, and we've been working with Neighborhood Connections and the Neighbor Up Network, particularly this past year, as it relates to a lot of the work around community response to COVID. So helping them and working with them on their grant making process and convening grantees and providing support and technical assistance to community projects throughout the 3-county region as it relates to COVID.
Okay.
And so our work at FAIR is really about building the capacity of community residents to address social determinants of health and health disparities in their own communities. So that's kind of how we fit in with Neighborhood Connections and the Neighbor Up Network.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So within this work, I know you mentioned responding to COVID-19 and community needs during this time. How has that impacted you guys' work, or shifted what you did pre-COVID to now? How have you seen the organization respond as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Sure. It was a huge shift because a lot about what we do is about forming relationships, and typically you do that in person. The great part about having the Neighbor Up Network and having that infrastructure already there was that we already had relationships with leaders in communities so that we could continue funding them so they could respond to what they know was needed. It was hard, especially in the beginning, right, to know what all was happening, who needed what, but knowing that you could go directly to residents who were connected to their community, and we had this network already in place, allowed us to it wasn't easy necessarily, but quickly have that infrastructure in place and kind of pivot. So we did that, and we also continued holding online spaces. I can talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that's led to in a minute, but I'll let Morgan talk about, we changed from mostly we do, and I think Erica, you know this, we give grants only to Cleveland and East Cleveland residents, and you have to be a resident to get those grants. But knowing that everyone was suffering as the pandemic was rolling out, we got a lot more funding to redistribute, and we went to Tri-County, as Morgan had mentioned.
Yeah, so we were able to expand through some support from the Greater Cleveland Rapid Response Fund throughout this past year for Cuyahoga, Geauga, and Lake counties, and projects really led by community members, civic groups, smaller nonprofit and faith-based organizations to respond to basic needs or create opportunities for social connection during COVID. And so as folks may know, Neighbor Connections action grants are usually twice a year. This committee convened came together back in April. And then we met for a weekly basis to review community grants up to $5,000 from groups responding to basic needs, food, housing support, opportunities for youth and social connection, virtual connection, and reviewed those grants on a weekly basis. And then in the summer moved to biweekly. So we're able to develop a response responsive grant-making framework that helps get the resources to the front lines where community members are working to address these critical community needs due to COVID.
Okay. And what types of proposals, where were those coming from? What did you see most in those batches? The types of organizations or entities represented?
Yeah, that's a great question. A really wide variety and diversity of different types of projects, different types of groups. I think that's one of the most exciting things when you open up the online portal and see the 25 applications to review that week, all of the great ideas that are coming from community members and civic groups. We have a real diversity of projects around food access, folks who are developing like Feed the Soul delivery systems to connect with food pantries in their community to get food to folks who have to shelter in place or vulnerable populations. We also saw people creating networks with restaurants in terms of food rescue and figuring out ways to get that food to folks who need it, to expanding pantry capacity or community meal program capacity, providing hygiene and support for people experiencing homelessness. Social connection for youth and doing gift baskets for young girls and young women and dropping them off at their home and providing an opportunity for them to connect, addressing social emotional health. So it really represented, I think the exciting thing is people are responding to the needs that they see in their community, and everyone sees a different need or is connected to their community in different ways. So we saw stuff from teams of just 3 residents coming together who wanted to address a need, to a faith-based organization, to a grassroots group who might be doing community art projects and figured out a way to kind of pivot and maybe do outdoor film screenings last summer that would bring the community together in a socially distanced way. So we really saw just a whole universe of great projects throughout the region.
I love it. And speaking of being distant and safe and outdoors, Kaela, I know you guys recently released an opportunity for residents to respond to a Get Outside grant.
Sure. And if I could back up a little bit, Erica, I'll tell how we got the why. So transitioning from like in-person convenings to digital ones, we started just listening for like, what else are people needing? What are people carrying? A lot of people who might show up to a lot of our stuff are folks who are taking care of themselves and taking care of a lot of others. And so we were like, self-care was a big thing that we heard over and over again because it was people carrying a lot. And going outside and getting on walks and spending time in public space was like easily identified as a theme we heard in early conversations. And this is back last spring when everything was new. So in response to that, we decided to have like a larger conversations concentrating on just some of those things. How are you staying connected? How are you getting outside? What are the issues you're experiencing in public spaces? Like, how are you feeling okay? And we heard a lot of things that we heard that people like needed that, but they were also fearful from some of those spaces. 1, because of COVID, and 2, because of racial discrimination for multiple groups in Cleveland and elsewhere. And so we decided to concentrate on that a little bit and figure out like, how can we support people? And we're still figuring some of this out, it's ongoing, in feeling comfortable in spaces, making those spaces safe, holding people accountable to keep those spaces safe. And we started transitioning. We had a series of conversations throughout the summer and fall and had a lot of people participate. And then as we were transitioning to the winter, it became a question of like, oh no, what are we gonna do? Yep. Not a question you would ever ask, but lots of Clevelanders tend to hunker down and stay inside. So we're like, how are we gonna help people stay outside this winter? Because we know it's what people are needing emotionally, physically, spiritually in some ways, like in order to stay healthy in like all of those aspects of their life. So we created a separate pool of funding and a lot of promotions and pop-ups around getting outside this winter, to Get Outside grants. And that again was a group of folks who were all had insight into that, and the residents are helping make the decisions about who gets that money.
Love it. I love the whole concept of folks being at the table who are actually in these communities, and it makes a huge difference. It does. So with the shift and how you all have been, changing and I guess tweaking how we do our work, what do you see as far as staying connected to these residents? So I know Neighbor Up is a huge network, and I'm not sure for you, Morgan, if there were folks at the table helping throughout this entire process. Do you still see them engaging? How has engagement looked?
Yeah, so we followed a similar pattern to the Get Outside grants in terms of a committee comprised of community members, residents, and smaller groups really making decisions about the grant making. And one of the things that we saw was an opportunity to convene those groups together, because I think that's another kind of factor that you were talking about, Kaela, in terms of social isolation. And because of the people are really innovating and we're having to respond to a lot of different information about COVID. So shifting and understanding, there was no best practice, there was no game plan. So people are reinventing at the neighborhood block level. And so we really saw an opportunity for those groups to come together. So a few weeks ago, we hosted a virtual convening through Neighborhood Connections and brought together, I think we had around 60 folks at each convening representing different projects, and provided us a chance for them to share what they're working on, and then also work on kind of critical questions in a collaborative way through breakout sessions. So talking about collaboration, talking about PPE distribution and how we can work together there, talking about self-care. And so we've been trying to kind of help folks migrate and learn how to use Zoom and all the different platforms, providing a basic tutorial for everybody. So everyone kind of comes into it understanding how those tools work, because they are new to all of us. And so we take the time to kind of create that space and also provide a place to celebrate the work that's happening, even though it's really hard and difficult, and then provide an opportunity to connect. And so we reach out via emails, phone calls, any way that we know we can connect with folks to talk to them about this convening and get them engaged. So kind of moving forward, I think we've all learned a lot of skills. And so I think we're trying to kind of figure out, as we transition slowly back to in-person, I still think we'll use some of these tools because we've been able to engage folks who might have kids at home who can't get out to a regular meeting. So I think it's helped bring new people to the table. And we're also trying to help folks that have been at the table to kind of join us through this virtual medium. It's not without its challenges, but I just continue to see that opportunity grow, especially as we work on other things like the digital divide, making sure people have the devices and are connected, which is another effort of Neighborhood Connections that kind of connects to all this work that we're trying to do together.
Yeah.
There are a few more examples of that too, Erica. We're not seeing like as many folks as we would in some of our in-person meetings because of the reality of Cleveland is that we are not digitally connected. It's super inequitable. And we do have a group at Neighbor Up that is working to figure out how can we cooperatively navigate internet usage and access. Some things, so we aren't seeing some of our regular folks, but we are seeing new people, like Morgan mentioned, who couldn't come before. And there's been some learnings about how do we continue to like do some kind of hybrid work in the future. Mm-hmm. Learning for us was we didn't do this at first, but now we are starting to provide things in different languages. We've had a Spanish grant application before, but some of the work we're doing now, we're trying to translate into Chinese and Arabic so that like there's even more access to what we're doing and people feel included into the spaces going forward. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same with American Sign Language. We had a couple of our sessions last summer with interpretation, and that some gaps we had before that this allowed us to slow down and see.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I love it. When an opportunity is presented where you can see where you can enhance your work and be more inclusive, it really makes a difference moving forward. And I think that's some of the good takeaways we've gotten from doing this type of work in a pandemic is learning how to stay connected and reach out to more people. So that's a great addition. And I wanted to kind of get you guys personally your feedback and maybe reflection on almost a year ago how you felt your organizations responded to you all staff-wise to the pandemic. I see, one of you are in office, one looks to be at home. I'm not sure. So how do you think your organization responded as a whole to the pandemic as far as staff goes, and how has that helped you cope and move through this?
Sure, I can start. We're lucky to be an organization that cares about its employees quite a bit. So we immediately shut down and went virtual. Digital. I mean, Zoom meetings are exhausting, but it is for the best health-wise. And I think we hit the ground running. I think Morgan can also attest to this with the grants part. Like we really did. Like we were doing phone trees. We were figuring out how to transition to these digital grants. we were a little old school before, I'm not gonna lie. Like, we did a lot of paper, and it was an access thing. We were trying to like make it the fewest amount of barriers possible for a resident to get grant money. And we might not have updated as quickly as we needed to. So this did force us to do a lot more digital stuff, but that was a transition. After the first couple months, it was good. Like Tom O'Brien, our director, did encourage us to take time off. And when there was like renewed attention on police brutality over the summer, I think that was an even harder thing to navigate. And we did shut down the office for a little while so people could process and step up if you needed to, step back if you needed to. So I appreciate that that is part of the values at Neighbor Up and Neighborhood Connections.
Yeah, I think we've kind of learned some of those same lessons. We've definitely built our technology skills as a team and working virtually. So we are a team of 4 at FAIR, and folks also have kids at home, and trying to do virtual learning with their kids on all of my team. And balancing that with work, just kind of being flexible, finding time to kind of come together over Zoom. We are, for the most part, all remote. I think the biggest challenge for us was really trying to be thoughtful and intentional with our community residents that we work with and partners who were continuing to respond to COVID, how best to support them while also taking the precautions we needed to keep ourselves and our families and our friends safe during the pandemic. And so we took a couple of weeks, about a year ago, right? Like March 13th, I kind of remember that date. And then we took a couple weeks to kind of assess, see where we were, and then how can we really support our partners on the ground. And I think it's this balance of, we saw a lot of larger organizations and institutions kind of go dark, but the need was just skyrocketing. And so what I think you saw was this whole network of emergent leaders in communities trying to figure out, oh, Miss Brown needs food at her door. How do we get that there? And so we tried to kind of work behind the scenes, get resources, teach folks how to use tools like Zoom so they could connect and communicate at the community level. We organize what we call community collectives, which are residents who are working together kind of across social determinants to really address them in their community. And looking at the intersection of food access and youth and people experiencing homelessness, and how do we create strategies that really address all of those needs at once. And so we also did interviews with a bunch of our partners to understand how was the food system responding, where were the needs, where were the gaps, interviewed about 30 folks, and then kind of put those needs out there so the funding community could also really understand at the block level where are resources needed most. And what we heard a lot from folks on the ground is the need for more coordination and collaboration. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing because you feel like you're in this frantic relief kind of mindset. But I think people who live in community understand that we need a longer term strategy. This is not something that's going away. And so that really kind of launched us into thinking, what are community residents experiencing? And so we went out and did, once the weather warmed up, we went out to a bunch of folks that we work with at distribution sites and corner stores to talk to residents to understand what their key issues were, and talked to about 350 residents throughout City of Cleveland and East Cleveland, really understanding, is food access an issue? Is it rent? Is it support for young people at home? And really trying to understand those dynamics and sharing those with the folks who have access to resources and where they can be distributed more equitably so everyone has what they need. And so we kind of completely shifted our work to figure out, how do we support community on the ground, and then how do we lift up that story so those folks are getting the resources that they need through things like the COVID rapid response grant making through Neighborhood Connections too.
So how can someone listening support your efforts? Where can they find out more information? How can they support?
Sure. NeighborUpCle.org has most of our information. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And we usually share what's going on, whether it's resources or opportunities to gather. We have weekly gatherings on Wednesdays if people just like want to be around other good, like-minded folks with good energy, trying to solve problems, or just trying to be in community. Like, there are many ways to plug in. Some really intense, where you spend every week going over grants with us. Or other times, it could just be popping in for one thing, just for a pick-me-up. Like, that's kind of the model of the network.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add is if you have an idea, there are resources out there for you to make that dream or that thing that you think about late at night, early in the morning when you have a quiet moment. There are resources, and there is a whole Neighbor Up network that's here to support you to figure out how to make that happen. If you see a need or you see an opportunity to engage people in your community during COVID, we want to see you make that happen. And so we have resources, meeting funding. We have an awesome support network. We have things like community of practice, which when I enter community of practice and leave community of practice an hour later, I come out a different person. It's just such a restorative group of people when we all are longing to connect. And they have figured out a magical way to feel this connection through Zoom. So I recommend if you're just kind of feeling like, yeah, you don't get to kind of bump into people and acquaintances, community of practice is a great place, but it's also a great place to come up and bring your idea and say, has anyone else been thinking about this? Has anyone else been wondering how we might be able to create social connection in this time? So there's a lot of resources out there, and we are here to help and make those dreams come true.
So I have two more questions for you ladies. My first question is, what is a message that you would share to your community members? Mm-hmm. So those that you help on a daily basis, send a word out to folks.
Mine would be thank you. Thank you for stepping up during this time. What people have come up with and their response at the community level is like amazing and overwhelming. Like, and I'm grateful for people doing that. Happy to be connected to them.
Yeah, I think, fortunate, unfortunate, I think crises really, people really rise to that challenge in amazing ways that I don't know that we realize as individuals we can do or collectively we can do. And I have to agree with you, Kaela, seeing and working with folks across the region who are leading these projects always leaves me in awe. And who knows better on what their community needs than people in those communities. And so I just kind of, my hats off, applause, everything to the folks who are really stepping up, who really know who needs help the most. And the folks on your block, who's not getting out, who is. And so I think really to continue supporting those folks. And if, again, you have ideas, come on out. There's still lots of opportunity to connect with others and make those ideas happen. So yeah, more people at the table. We need you.
I love it.
We need you more than ever. Yep.
So I thank you both for your wonderful work. And I thank you both for your inclusion of community, which I just feel, that's one of my passions and things that I really, I guess, feel strongly about is the inclusion of all folks at the table. So I appreciate your work. And I think, with us being a year into this pandemic and things are slowly beginning to shift, but so many folks are still, struggling and missing out on so many resources that they need. I wanted to ask you guys, because this work can get kind of tough. What are you doing for self-care?
I am trying to go outside as much as possible. If you know what I was going to say, that's why I laughed.
Stealing my line. You're stealing my line.
Yeah. Morgan and I see each other walking by.
We do.
We need to walk together at some point. But yeah, I try to go to the woods because that's where I get renewed. And just like make sure I'm going every day for like a walk outside, regardless of how cold it is, like getting outside of my house in a safe, COVID safe way. Like, that's definitely my self-care and getting energized by people who are doing good stuff like both of you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I am lucky I live close to Edgewater, so I'm there like every day. And winter is actually one of my favorite times at Edgewater. It freezes. The number of people kind of die down a little bit. Sometimes I'm the only one. It feels like my park. It's just, I don't care if it's 15 degrees and windy. It's just, I am in awe and I can kind of just be in that moment when I'm outside. And so, yeah, I get out for a long walk every day. It's kind of where I process the day, where new ideas bubble up for me. And I can just kind of let it all go. So being outside, as you know, Erica, whether it's on the river, on the lake, on the trail, that's where I recharge too. And I think, staying connected to people virtually. I mean, my family's not here. I've been able to stay connected with friends and family and just kind of, I know those connections are important to keep nurturing, even if I don't like the virtual platform all the time. When I leave those calls, I do feel connected. I feel loved. And so that's an important part of keeping me going too. Yeah.
I love it.
And Morgan, you made me think, I got yelled at the other day in a community meeting because on the radio, I said that Edgewater in the winter is a great place to go. And people are like, why are you blowing that up?
I know. Shh, don't tell anybody. Yeah.
No,
It's
I
the
rolled
best.
past and I was like, hold up, wait a minute, let me turn around because no, you're not gonna be down there having fun in the snow without me. And back around to go down, you know, and just to kind of hang out for a little bit. But it's a different lake, it's a different environment. So it's kind of
Yes.
cool just to go out and have fun when it's just
Oh, it is.
white and just
Yes.
quiet. So yeah.
Yep.
What do you do for self-care, Erica?
Oh, same thing. I mean, I'm like looking outside now. The sun is coming through my windows. My house plants are getting some natural sunlight instead of the little light or whatever. So yeah, I'm super excited to get outside as much as I can. So same.
Yep. That's where it's at. Mm-hmm.
And those virtual happy hours are kind of fun too. So
They are. Yeah.
haven't in a while. You guys, you ladies are great. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time and keep doing the wonderful work that you're doing. And I'm sure we'll be in touch since we're all, you know, crossing paths and doing great
Good.
things out here. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for highlighting the work that's happening out there. It's really important that we, gave all these folks some love who've been just at it and working in their community. So appreciate the opportunity to share that. Thank you.